At my son's lavish wedding reception, his new wife smiled in front of 300 guests and ripped the wig off my seriously ill wife's head. The hall went silent. My wife trembled, covering her bare scalp, while that woman leaned down and whispered, "Your sickly presence only brings bad luck here." A few people laughed. I didn't shout. I covered my wife with my jacket, helped her stand, and walked quietly to the stage. When I took the microphone, my son and his bride still had no idea what was coming. This story isn't easy, but sometimes the hardest ones matter most. Before we continue, drop a quick comment. What are you doing while you listen? Driving, working, or taking a quiet moment? I read every comment, and your voice matters here. Quick note, some details have been adjusted for storytelling. What matters is the message at the heart of it. At my son's wedding reception, his new wife reached across the table and tore the wig from my dying wife's head in front of 300 guests. I watched it happen in slow motion, Savannah's hand moving fast, the chestnut hairpiece lifting away my Lorraine's bare scalp exposed under the chandelier lights of Riverside Event Hall. 3 seconds of absolute silence. Then the gasps. Someone laughed, one of Savannah's friends, a sharp bark quickly stifled. My wife's hands flew to her head, and she started to cry. I did not scream. I did not cause a scene. I stood up, walked to where Lorraine sat trembling, and took off my suit jacket. I draped it over her head and shoulders, gentle as always. I knelt down so I could look in her eyes. "In my eyes, you are still the most beautiful woman in this room," I said. Then I stood, turned to face my son Preston, standing frozen beside his bride, and I understood with perfect clarity that I was about to destroy everything he thought he'd built. But to understand how we arrived at that moment, I need to take you back 3 months. My name is Leland Hughes. I'm 69 years old, and for 40 years I've turned wrenches at Hughes Auto Repair on the east side of Dayton, Ohio. Small garage, 2 bays, the kind of place where regulars bring their trucks because they trust you. I can diagnose most engine problems by sound alone, the tick of a worn valve lifter, the wheeze of a dying alternator, the knock that means you're already too late. I never needed much from this life. Just honest work. Just Lorraine's smile at the end of the day. Just the knowledge that I'd built something solid for my 2 boys, Preston and Kieran. That September morning, the first Monday after Labor Day, I opened the garage at 6 a.m., like I'd done for 4 decades. The air smelled like motor oil and coffee. The radio played something old, Creedence or the Stones. I pulled on my coveralls and looked at the schedule: 3 oil changes, a transmission problem, brake work before the weekend. Simple work, good work. I thought about Lorraine at home, probably just waking up, moving slow because the chemotherapy made her tired in ways that had nothing to do with sleep. Breast cancer, stage 2, diagnosed back in March. 6 months of treatment. She'd lost her hair in May. By June, I'd saved enough from night shifts to buy her that wig. I finished the morning work and drove home to check on her. Lorraine Hughes. My wife of 43 years sat at her bedroom vanity adjusting the chestnut wig when I walked in. 67 years old, thin from the treatment, but still trying to look presentable. Her hands shook slightly as she positioned the hairpiece just right. She saw me in the mirror. I walked up behind her, put my hands on her shoulders. "You look beautiful," I said. "You always do." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She was worried about the wedding, about being sick during what should be a celebration. I never told her about those 3 months of midnight shifts. April through June. I worked the graveyard slot at the truck stop garage on Route 46 hours after my regular day ended. The wig cost $1,200 more than I'd spent on anything in years. But watching her look at herself in that mirror, trying to feel normal again, it was worth every hour of lost sleep. Some things a husband doesn't need his wife to know. Some sacrifices are better kept quiet. "Preston called yesterday," Lorraine said. He and Savannah want to come for dinner this weekend. He sounded so happy. That's good, I said, but something in my chest tightened. How does a father miss the moment his son stops being his son? When does the voice change from warm to calculating, from dad to transaction? That evening, after Lorraine went to bed early, always early now, I sat in my garage with the overhead light casting long shadows. I kept an old metal desk in the corner with drawers that stuck. In the bottom drawer, locked, sat a blue passbook for a savings account at First Dayton Bank. $350,000. You have to understand, I'd been saving that money since Preston was 10 years old. Every overtime check, every bonus, every tax refund that could be spared. I told Lorraine we were saving for retirement, which was true enough, but this account she didn't know about. This was my secret, my surprise, my gift. 22 years of living carefully, driving the same truck for 15 years, skipping vacations, brown bagging lunch, saying no to things we wanted, so I could say yes to something bigger. The plan was simple. On Preston's wedding day, I'd hand him the passbook. Tell him it was for a down payment on a house, for security, for starting his life right. I'd imagined his face when he saw that number. The shock, the gratitude, maybe even tears. I'd imagined him understanding how much his father loved him. But that phone call last week, something in Preston's voice wasn't right. He'd asked about the house, about whether Mom and I had updated our will, about future plans, in a tone that felt less like concern and more like reconnaissance. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe stress was making me paranoid. Maybe my 32-year-old son was just being practical, thinking ahead, trying to be responsible. Or maybe, and this thought came to me in that dark garage as I held the passbook, maybe I didn't know my son as well as I thought I did. I kept that money secret for over 20 years, the most beautiful surprise I'd ever planned. It was supposed to be the proudest moment of my life, handing my son the keys to his future. Until that week, when his voice on the phone sounded less like my boy and more like a stranger negotiating a transaction. 3 days later, that phone call would prove my instincts right. The phone rang at 8 o'clock that Thursday night, and I made the mistake every father makes. I assumed my son was calling because he cared. Lorraine and I were watching television in the living room, the volume low because loud sounds bothered her lately. She sat in her favorite chair with a blanket across her lap, despite the September warmth. When my phone lit up with Preston's name, she smiled. "Answer it," she said. "He probably wants to talk about the wedding." I picked up. "Hey, Dad," Preston said, his voice unusually smooth, like honey poured over gravel. "Just wanted to check in. How's Mom doing with the treatments?" Preston Hughes. My 32-year-old eldest son had built a successful career as a regional appliance salesman, smooth-talking, always dressed sharp, with a voice that could sell ice to Eskimos, and a smile that had once made me proud. He'd learned sales from the ground up, worked his way to district manager, made decent money. I'd bragged about him at the garage, told customers my boy was doing well. "She's tired but managing," I said. "Doctor says she's responding well." "That's good, that's really good. I worry about you both, you know. It's hard being so far away, not able to help out more." He lived 20 minutes across town. Not exactly far. "We're doing fine, son. Your mother's strong." "She is, she really is." A pause. "And how are you holding up? You're carrying a lot right now." "I'm all right. Working at the garage, still full-time." "Same as always. 40 years, same schedule." "That's a lot of hours on your feet, Dad." "At your age, with everything going on, have you thought about maybe cutting back, maybe thinking about the future?" Lorraine was watching me, still smiling. She couldn't hear his side of the conversation, just saw her son calling, just felt loved. "I'm fine, Preston. Work keeps me steady." Right. I get that." Another pause, longer this time. But with Mom's health and everything, have you guys thought about the future, I mean, in terms of making sure everything's settled properly? Settled. Yeah, the house and everything. Is it all in order legally, I mean? I just want to make sure you're protected. That if something happens, God forbid, everything's clear and straightforward. Something in my chest tightened. The house is fine, Preston. We've lived here 38 years. Mortgage paid off in 2009. But that's great. That's great. But is it in both your names or just yours? Because with Mom sick, you want to make sure there aren't any complications later. Estate stuff can get messy if things aren't organized right. When does a father stop trusting his son's voice? It's in both our names, I said carefully. Why are you asking? Just being responsible, Dad. Savannah's been reading about this stuff, estate planning and all that. Her parents went through a nightmare when her grandmother passed because nothing was documented properly. We just want to make sure you guys are protected, that everything's clear. I'm protected from what? Well, from complications, from legal hassles. You know how it is, paperwork, probate, all that garbage. I'm just trying to think ahead for you. Lorraine caught my eye, mouthed, "Is everything okay?" I nodded. "We appreciate your concern," I said. "But we've got things handled." Of course you do. Of course. I'm just trying to help. That's all. Make sure my parents are taken care of." His voice warmed up again, that sales voice kicking back in. "Anyway, I didn't mean to get all serious. Main thing is Mom's doing well. That's what matters. We'll see you both at dinner this weekend, yeah. Yeah. Love you, Dad. Love you too." I set the phone down. "What did he want?" Lorraine asked. "Just checking in, asking about your health." Her face lit up. "He's such a thoughtful son, worrying about us like that. Always thinking ahead, making sure we're taken care of." She stood slowly, steadying herself on the chair arm. "I just hope I'm strong enough to see him married. That's all I want. To see our boy happy." She kissed my forehead and headed toward the bedroom. I heard the bathroom door close, heard water running. I stayed in my chair, TV volume still down, replaying the conversation. Asked about the house. Asked if it was in both names. Asked about estate planning. Didn't ask how we were feeling. Didn't ask about memories or plans or whether we needed anything. Asked about property. Asked about legal status. Asked about what happens if something happens. And then I really heard it. The pause before each question. The careful phrasing. The way he steered every answer back to property and papers. The way he said complications and protected, like he was reading from a script. That wasn't a son talking to his father. That was a salesman qualifying a lead. I'd heard that voice 100 times, the smooth transition from rapport to questions, the false concern masking information, gathering the careful word choices designed to make the target feel like you're helping them, when really you're helping yourself. I knew that voice. I just never thought I'd hear it pointed at me. Lorraine came back in her nightgown, took her pills from the little organizer on the end table. "Coming to bed?" she asked. "In a bit. Want to finish this show?" She kissed my cheek and left. I sat there in the dark, TV flickering until past midnight. Then 1 a.m., then 2. Replaying every syllable. Preston hadn't called to check on his mother. He'd called to inventory his inheritance. And the worst part, the part that kept me awake until the sky started turning gray outside the window, was realizing this probably wasn't his first time. How many conversations had we had over the past year that I'd interpreted as care when really they were reconnaissance? How long had my son been circling his parents like a vulture waiting for the meal? I sat in that dark living room until 3 in the morning, cold coffee beside me, trying to convince myself I was wrong, trying to find another explanation, trying to be the father who trusts his son. But I couldn't, because I knew what I'd heard. Within the week, I'd find out exactly how right my instincts were. 3 days after that phone call, I found Preston's borrowed power drill in my toolbox and decided to return it in person. Wednesday evening, 7 o'clock. I could have called ahead like a normal father, but something in me wanted to see my son's face unguarded. I drove to his rental house in Kettering, a small place about 20 minutes from ours. The front door stood slightly ajar, warm light spilling onto the porch. I could hear voices inside. I walked up the steps carrying the drill, pushed the door open. "Preston, it's Dad. Brought your drill back." No answer. The voices continued from the living room. I stepped into the entryway and heard my own name. Your father won't know what hit him," a woman's voice said. Sharp, confident. Not the sweet tone Savannah used when she called Lorraine Mom. I froze in the dark hallway. "Are you sure this is the only way?" That was Preston, uncertain. It's the smart way." Savannah Frost, 29 years old, with a real estate license she'd earned 6 months earlier, and designer clothes bought on credit, sat somewhere in that living room. We tell her it's federal medical assistance paperwork. Cancer patients get forms like that all the time. She won't read it, she trusts you. That's what makes this work. I should have walked in. Should have ended it right there. But my body wouldn't move. "She's dying, Savannah. This feels wrong." "She's dying anyway." Cold, like discussing the weather. "Would you rather Kieran gets your inheritance while you get nothing? Your parents trust him more. If we don't do this now, you'll end up with pennies while your little brother gets the house." Silence. Then Preston's voice quieter. "The house is worth 200,000, maybe more." "Exactly. And we need it. My car payment is 3 months behind. Your credit cards are maxed. We've got a wedding to pay for. This solves everything." "What if she reads the documents?" "She won't. She can barely stay awake through her shows. We bring the papers next Sunday dinner, act concerned. Tell her it's urgent federal forms for treatment coverage. She signs. We record it. Done. And Dad, what about him? He's 69 and works in a garage. He's not going to check documents. By the time he figures it out, if he ever does, the house is ours legally." The drill in my hands felt like it weighed 100 pounds. "I don't know," Preston said. "Maybe we should just ask them for help." Savannah laughed. "Oh yeah, great idea. Hey, Mom and Dad, can we have your house because we're broke? That'll go over well." "No. We do this smart, and in 6 months, when your mother's gone, you sell the property, and we're set." Another silence. "Okay," Preston finally said. "Sunday dinner, I'll bring the papers." That's my smart boy. I backed out of the house so quietly, I might have been a ghost. Set the drill on the porch, walked to my car, got inside. Sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, unable to start the engine. My son. The boy I'd sold my Chevrolet to save when he was 4, and insurance wouldn't cover his surgery. The child I'd taught to throw a baseball, to check oil, to shake hands firm. That boy had just agreed to forge documents and trick his dying mother into signing away her home. There's a sound a father's heart makes when it breaks. It's not dramatic. It's quiet, like ice cracking on a frozen lake in the middle of the night. That's what I heard sitting in my car outside my son's house. I don't know how long I stayed there. 20 minutes, maybe an hour. Cars passed. Somewhere a dog barked. The world kept moving like nothing had changed. Finally, I started the engine. Drove across town to Malcolm Mercer's house. Malcolm, 58 years old, with silver hair and a law degree from Ohio State, had been my attorney and closest friend for 20 years. The kind of man who answered middle-of-the-night phone calls without complaint. He answered his door in pajama pants and a t-shirt. "Leland, what's wrong?" "I need to see you first thing tomorrow morning," I said. "Legal matter, 7 a.m., your office?" He studied my face. "I'll be there." I didn't sleep that night. Thursday morning, 6:45. I sat in Malcolm's office while he brewed coffee. His receptionist wouldn't arrive until 8:30. Just him and me. I told him everything. Malcolm's face went from concerned to angry to coldly professional in 5 minutes. He opened his laptop, started typing. Deed signed under duress by a terminally ill person is legally void, he said. But prevention is better than fighting it in court later. We're going to create a revocable living trust. You're the sole trustee. The house transfers into the trust today. Any deed Lorraine signs from this point forward is worthless. She won't own the property anymore. The trust will. How fast can we do this? An hour. We signed the papers at 8:15. Malcolm notarized them, filed them electronically with the county. It's done, he said. Your house is untouchable. Preston's fraud will fail before it starts. You have to understand why I didn't storm into that living room and drag my son out by his collar. Because anger is a luxury. And I needed to be smarter than my rage. Malcolm leaned back in his chair. We can stop this right now. Call the police, show them intent to commit fraud. Press charges before they even try. I looked at the trust documents still warm from the printer. Thought about Preston's voice in that living room, calculating the value of his mother's corpse. Not yet, I said. I want to know who they truly are. I want to see exactly how far my son will go. Malcolm studied me. And then I'll show him who his father really is. By the end of the week, I'd have my answer, and it would be worse than I imagined. The trust was signed by noon Thursday, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd heard at Preston's house. Friday night, I couldn't sleep. I went to my garage after midnight and stared at the corner where something used to be. There's a space in my garage where a 1967 Chevrolet Impala once sat my father's car, the only thing he left me. And for 28 years, I've avoided looking at that empty corner because it reminds me of the price I paid to save my eldest son's life. My father gave me that car when I was 18. Said a man needs one thing that's his alone. I kept it perfect. Waxed it every Sunday. Rebuilt the engine twice. For 17 years, that car sat in this exact spot, until the day I had to choose between metal and my son's life. Preston doesn't know. He was 4 years old, too young to remember. It was summer 1995. July. Preston rode his bicycle down Mrs. Henderson's driveway and didn't see her backing out. She hit him going maybe 5 miles an hour. Just a tap. But he fell wrong, hit his head on the concrete. Skull fracture, traumatic brain injury. The hospital needed $18,000 for emergency surgery within 6 hours, or there'd be permanent damage. Maybe death. Insurance denied the claim some clause about accidental injury on private property. Lorraine sat in the emergency room holding Preston's hand while he lay unconscious. She looked up at me with tears streaming and said, "We don't have the money, Leland. What are we going to do?" We had $3,000 in savings. $3,000 against $18,000. We're going to save our son, I said. I left the hospital, drove straight to Harold Benson's place. He collected vintage cars, had money, always said, if I ever wanted to sell the Chevrolet, to call him first. I need $11,000 cash in 2 hours, I said. You can have my Impala. He knew what it was worth. Knew I was desperate. Could have lowballed me. Instead, he said, let me make some calls. 2 hours later, I had $11,000 in cash. Drove straight to First Dayton Bank, told them I needed to mortgage my garage for $7,000, and I needed the loan approved today. The manager said, that's not how it works. Said these things take weeks. I put my hands on his desk and said, my son is dying. I need $7,000 in 3 hours. Find a way. He found a way. By 7 o'clock that night, I had $18,000. Preston went into surgery at 7:30. Came out at midnight. Doctor said he'd be fine, no permanent damage. Perfect recovery. I spent the next 19 years paying off that garage mortgage. Extra shifts, weekend work, every spare dollar. Paid the last installment in 2014. A father's love is a strange currency. You spend it freely, never counting the cost, and you tell yourself the transaction is complete when your child grows up healthy and whole. But the debt never really goes away. You just learn to stop thinking about what you traded. Preston graduated college, got married, built a career. He never knew the car that saved his brain used to sit right here in this empty corner I've avoided looking at for 28 years. And now that same son was planning to forge documents and steal his mother's house. I turned off the garage light and went inside. Saturday morning, I woke up at 6 out of habit. Made coffee, sat at the kitchen table. Looked out the window at the driveway and noticed something I should have noticed days ago. Kieran's truck was gone. Had been gone for a while, actually. Maybe a week, maybe 2. How long had I not been paying attention? Kieran came downstairs around 9, poured himself coffee. "Where's your truck?" I asked. "Haven't seen it in a while." He paused mid-pour just for a second. "Left it at a buddy's shop. Needs some work." "No big deal." "What kind of work?" "Transmission stuff. Maybe the clutch. Still figuring it out." "Need money for parts." "Nah, I got it covered." He set down his mug. "Gonna go mow the lawn." "I can do that later." "It's fine, I got time." He went outside before I could ask anything else. I stood up, walked to the front window, watched him pull the old push mower from the shed. Kieran Hughes, 28 years old, electrical technician, at the power company, still living at home, because Lorraine needed help, and he never complained about staying. He pushed that mower across the front lawn in straight lines, same way he'd done it since he was 16. Never asked to be paid for it. Never asked if someone else could do it. Just did it. I watched him, and really looked maybe the first time in months I'd actually seen my youngest son, instead of just noticing him there like part of the furniture. Why is it that the child who takes everything is the one we notice, while the child who asks for nothing becomes invisible? Kieran worked full-time, made decent money. Still lived in his childhood bedroom so he could help his mother to the bathroom at 2 in the morning when nausea got bad. Still ate dinner with us every night. Still fixed things around the house without being asked. And his truck, the truck he'd saved 2 years to buy, was suddenly gone. And his explanation was repairs. But Kieran could fix anything himself. He was an electrical technician. Cars were easy for him. I'd seen him rebuild an alternator on the kitchen table. So why would he leave his truck at someone else's shop? I stood on that porch, watching my youngest son mow a lawn he never complained about mowing, living in a house he never demanded to own, caring for a mother he never resented for being sick. And I realized something that made my chest tight. Kieran never complained, never asked for help, never made noise. I'd gotten so used to his silence, I stopped questioning what it meant. That was my mistake. By the end of the week, I'd learn exactly what that missing truck had paid for, and the price would break my heart all over again. I spent Saturday evening thinking about Kieran's missing truck. Sunday afternoon, Preston and Savannah arrived with coffee and pastries from the expensive bakery downtown, and for 30 minutes, I almost forgot my son was planning to steal our house. Lorraine had made an effort despite her exhaustion. She wore the wig, had carefully applied makeup, sat in her favorite chair. When Savannah walked in, carrying the white pastry box, her voice went honey-sweet. Mrs. Hughes, you look so lovely today. That wig is really beautiful." Lorraine smiled. "Thank you, dear. I'm trying to look presentable for the wedding." We sat in the living room with coffee. Small talk about the venue, guest count, flowers. Preston looked relaxed, laughed at the right moments, asked his mother how she was feeling. If I hadn't heard him planning fraud, I would have believed every word. After 20 minutes, Preston set down his cup. "Dad, can you show me that tool set in the garage? I need your advice on something." "You two go ahead," Lorraine said. "Savannah and I can have some girl talk." I followed Preston outside. Inside the garage, Preston's eyes moved across the space. He wasn't looking at tools. He was scanning Wall's equipment square footage like an appraiser calculating value. "So what did you need advice about?" I asked. "Oh, just wedding stuff, budget questions." He picked up a wrench, set it down. "This garage has to be worth something, right? Prime location, good size. I've had it 40 years. Don't ever think about selling this whole property. You and Mom could downsize." He's not asking about tools. He's inventorying assets. "We like it here," I said. "Your mother wants to stay." Sure. Just thinking ahead." He moved to the workbench. "How much do you think it's all worth? The house, the garage, the lot?" Every word felt rehearsed. "Hold on," I said. "I need to grab something from inside." I walked back to the house, opened the front door, quietly stepped into the hallway. Voices from the living room. "I just sang this because I care," Savannah was saying. Her honey-sweet tone had vanished. Now her voice cut like a blade. "Maybe it's better if you skip the ceremony. You understand, right?" I froze in the hallway. "I just want to see my son get married," Lorraine said softly. "But your illness makes everyone worry. The wedding needs a joyful atmosphere, not reminders of mortality. I've worked so hard on this day. I need it to be perfect. I won't be a burden. It's not about being a burden. It's about the energy you bring. Cancer changes how people feel in a room." Silence. Then Lorraine, "I understand." Good. And honestly, you'll probably be relieved not to make the trip. The exact moment you realize your child chose wrong, it doesn't feel like a revelation. It feels like falling through ice. 1 second the surface holds you. The next you're drowning in cold water, and everything you thought was solid has disappeared. My hand moved to my pocket, pulled out my phone, opened the recording app. Ohio's one-party consent law meant I could record any conversation I was in proximity to. I held the phone at my side. "Nah, and another thing," Savannah continued. "Preston mentioned you've been having trouble with medical bills. If you ever need to make arrangements about the house, you should talk to us first. We're family. The house." She just thinking ahead. "In case something happens. You want to make sure everything goes smoothly, right? No legal complications, I suppose." Well, what you want and what's best for everyone aren't always the same thing." I recorded for another minute. Every word, every cold calculation. Then I cleared my throat loudly and walked in. Savannah's face transformed instantly, smile blooming eyes warm. "Oh, there you are. Your wife and I were just having the nicest chat." Lorraine looked at me. Her hands trembled. She forced a smile. "Did you find what you needed?" she asked. "I did," I said, phone in my pocket. Found exactly what I needed. They left 20 minutes later. Savannah kissed Lorraine's cheek at the door. Lorraine went to bed early, said she was tired. I went to the garage. 11 o'clock. The house quiet, the street dark. I sat at my work desk and pulled out a blank piece of paper. Picked up a pen. I don't know why I started writing. Maybe because everything was changing so fast I needed to hold on to something. Maybe because I was afraid if I didn't write it down, I'd forget that the person I was fighting used to be someone I loved. "Dear Preston," I wrote, "I don't know if I'll ever give you this letter." My pen moved across the page. "I remember when you were 8 and asked if you could help me fix Mrs. Caldwell's Buick. You were so proud when the engine started. I remember your 15th birthday when you scored the winning goal. Your mother and I screamed ourselves hoarse. I remember graduation day, how you shook my hand like a man and said thank you for everything. Where did that boy go? When did I lose him? Memory is a strange thing. You can hold on to it like a photograph, but eventually the edges blur and you forget what was real and what you wished had been real. That's why I needed to write it down, before the good memories dissolved completely. My hand stopped mid-sentence. The pen felt heavy. I folded the letter carefully, opened the bottom drawer of my work desk underneath oil-stained receipts and warranty papers, placed it inside. Maybe someday I'd finish it. Maybe someday I'd hand it to my son and ask him to remember who he used to be. But that night, I just needed to write it down, proof that the child I'd loved had existed somewhere even if I couldn't find him anymore. 3 days later, I discovered just how far that child had truly gone. 3 days after I wrote that letter on a Monday morning in late October, the security camera alert buzzed on my phone while I was elbow-deep in a transmission rebuild. When I opened the app, I watched my son walk into my house carrying a briefcase and wearing the smile of a man about to close a deal. 11:30 a.m. I was at the garage with a customer's Silverado torn apart on the lift. My phone sat on the workbench screen, lighting up with a motion alert from the camera system I'd installed last week. Preston's car in the driveway. Preston and Savannah walking up to the front door. They didn't call ahead. I wiped grease from my hands and opened the app. Live feed from the living room camera mounted high in the corner behind a decorative plant. I'd positioned it perfectly clear view of the entire room, the coffee table, the couch where Lorraine usually sat. Preston let himself in with his key, called out to his mother. She appeared from the kitchen wearing her robe wig slightly crooked. He hugged her. Savannah hugged her too, all smiles and warmth. Preston set his briefcase on the coffee table. They're here," I said to the empty garage. "It's happening. I should have driven home. Should have burst through that door and thrown them out. But I stayed exactly where I was, phone in my grease-stained hands, watching the screen. Stay calm. Watch. Record everything." Preston opened the briefcase, pulled out documents, official-looking papers with printed headers, multiple pages. He arranged them on the coffee table, speaking to his mother with animated hand gestures, that salesman body language I knew so well. Reassuring, trustworthy. Your best friend explaining something for your own good. Savannah stood behind Lorraine's chair, hand on her shoulder, smiling encouragement. The camera angle was perfect. I could see every document he was pulling out, every gesture, every expression. Preston pointed to something on the first page. Lorraine leaned forward, squinting. She'd left her reading glasses in the bedroom again. She was always doing that, since the chemo started affecting her focus. Preston said something pointed again. Lorraine nodded. He handed her a pen. She took it. She trusts him completely, I said to the screen. She's signing without reading a single line. Lorraine's hand moved across the first page, then the second, then the third. Preston gathered each signed page, immediately placed them back in the briefcase with efficient movements. The whole interaction took maybe 12 minutes. When Lorraine set down the pen, Preston hugged her. Savannah hugged her. They chatted for another minute, Lorraine smiling, relieved that whatever bureaucratic paperwork Preston had brought was handled, grateful her responsible son was taking care of things. Then Preston and Savannah exchanged a glance. Quick, satisfied. The look two people share when a plan has worked exactly as intended. They left 3 minutes later. 20 minutes. That's all it took for him to steal a house. I stood in my garage holding my phone, transmission forgotten, customer forgotten, everything forgotten. Except that screen showing my empty living room where my wife sat alone, having just signed away her home to the son she loved. There's a special kind of pain that comes from watching your child commit a crime against the person who gave them life. It's not anger. It's not even surprise. It's the death of hope, final, irreversible, documented in high definition. That night, I sat in the garage rewatching the footage. Paused. Zoomed. Frame by frame. There, frame 47. Preston adjusts the papers on the coffee table, straightening them before Lorraine signs. For 3 seconds, the top document's header is visible, angled toward the camera. Property transfer deed. Montgomery County, Ohio. Not medical assistance paperwork, not insurance forms, not federal health care documents, a deed, a property deed. He told his dying mother she was signing medical paperwork. He lied to her face. And I had it recorded, time-stamped crystal clear. I watched his expression in the moment after Lorraine signed. Not relief that his mother's medical coverage was secured. Not concern for her well-being. Satisfaction, relief, greed, not love. Savannah's smile as they left predatory victory. I had everything. Video, audio, timestamp, fraud in 4K resolution. Tuesday morning, 7 a.m. I called Malcolm from the garage. Preston came by yesterday, I said. Got Lorraine to sign the deed. I have it on camera. Silence. Then, hold on, let me check something. Keyboard clicking. Malcolm pulling up county recorder database. When did this happen? Yesterday, October 23rd, around noon. More clicking. Then Malcolm's voice, careful and precise. The Leland Hughes Living Trust was recorded October 18th, 5 days ago. Your wife signed Preston's deed October 23rd yesterday, meaning any deed Preston submits will be rejected. The property already belongs to the trust. Lorraine didn't own the house when she signed his papers. She couldn't transfer property that wasn't hers to transfer. His document is void. I closed my eyes. Let that sink in. Preston's fraud was legally worthless before he even committed it. You could have him arrested today, Malcolm said. Attempted fraud, elder abuse, forgery. With that video, this is an open and shut federal case. You might ask why I didn't stop it. Why I let my wife sign papers I knew were fraudulent. Because stopping something and exposing something are two entirely different strategies. And I needed my son to see exactly who he'd become. I know the house is safe, I said. But I want him to try filing that deed. I want to watch him realize his father outsmarted him. That's a risk, Leland, if he... The risk is already handled. The trust can't be undone. The deed can't be honored. Preston can try whatever he wants. He's already lost. Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. What are you planning? Justice, I said. Not just safety. Justice. I hung up and sat in the cold morning quiet of my garage thinking about the difference between safety and justice. The house was safe. Preston's fraud was worthless. His crime already neutralized by a trust he didn't know existed. But justice required my son to understand what he'd done. And for that, I needed him to keep walking forward blind and confident until the moment he stepped off the cliff. What I didn't know yet was how much deeper the betrayal went, or what my youngest son had been hiding all along. I spent Tuesday and Wednesday thinking about Preston's worthless deed and waiting for him to try filing it at the county recorder. Wednesday evening, I learned what my youngest son had been hiding, and it changed everything I thought I knew about my family. I had 2 sons, and for 69 years, I thought I knew which one would take care of me when I got old. Until that Wednesday night, I asked a simple question over dinner and realized I'd been watching the wrong child all along. We were sitting at the kitchen table. Just the 3 of us, Lorraine, Kieran, and me. Quiet meal, nothing special. Kieran had made spaghetti because Lorraine was too tired to cook. He'd been doing that a lot lately, coming home from his shift at the power company and taking over the kitchen without being asked. I'd been thinking about his missing truck for days, his evasive answers. The way he never complained, never asked for help, never made noise. I set down my fork. Kieran, I said, trying to sound casual. Whatever happened to that job offer in Colorado you mentioned last spring? Denver, wasn't it? Solar company. His fork stopped mid-air. His face went pale. Lorraine looked up, confused. What Colorado job? The silence stretched heavy across the table. Dad, Kieran said quietly. What are you talking about? Lorraine's voice rose slightly. Kieran never mentioned Colorado. Kieran set his fork down, stared at his plate. His jaw worked like he was chewing words he didn't want to say. It wasn't important, he finally said. Just a job offer I didn't take. What kind of offer? I asked. He looked at me, then at his mother, then back at his plate. Senior electrical technician, solar installation company in Denver. They recruited me 8 months ago, called 3 times. How much? I asked. He hesitated. How much, son? So $98,000 a year. 3-year contract. They said I had real talent. Said they'd pay for relocation, signing bonus, the works. Lorraine's hand went to her mouth. 98,000, Kieran. That's why didn't you tell us? Because you were sick, Mom. His voice stayed level, matter-of-fact. You were starting chemotherapy. I couldn't leave when you needed family most. But that's almost double what you make now, Lorraine said, tears starting. We would have wanted you to go. No. Kieran looked at her directly. That's not a choice. That's just being a son. I didn't tell you because I didn't want everyone seeing it as sacrifice. It was just what you do for family. My throat went tight. I couldn't speak. Kieran, Lorraine whispered. Oh, sweetheart. It's fine. I like my job here. It's fine. But it wasn't fine. He'd given up nearly $100,000, a major career advancement, a 3-year contract, and he'd never said a word. Never complained. Never made us feel guilty. Never asked for anything in return. Some children are born knowing how to love without keeping score. Others grow up calculating every transaction, even with their own parents. I spent 69 years thinking love was something you taught. Turns out some people just have it, and some people never will. Lorraine cried through the rest of dinner. Kieran tried to change the subject, made jokes, acted like it was no big deal. Later I heard her in their bedroom, telling him how proud she was, how sorry she was, how he should have told them. I went to the garage. Thursday morning, I couldn't focus on work. Kept thinking about the contrast. Preston conspiring to rob his dying mother. Kieran silently giving up close to $100,000 to care for her. 2 sons, same upbringing, completely opposite moral cores. How did I raise such different men? I checked my security camera app out of habit, scanning through yesterday's alerts. Noticed a motion notification from Wednesday afternoon, 2 p.m. I'd been at the garage. Lorraine would have been napping. I pulled up the footage. Savannah's car in the driveway. Nobody told me she was coming over. I watched the playback. Savannah entering through the front door. She had Preston's key. She paused in the entryway, listened. The house was quiet. Lorraine sleeping upstairs. Savannah walked directly to my study, not wandering, not looking around. Purposeful. She went to the desk, opened the first drawer, then the second. Methodical, searching. Third drawer, the locked one I'd forgotten to lock that morning. She pulled out the blue passbook. My savings account. The one with $350,000. Her face transformed. Not surprised she'd known it was there. She'd been looking for it specifically. Slow, calculating smile spread across her features. She pulled her phone from her purse, photographed the front page, then every page inside. Careful, methodical, making sure every number was captured clearly. Then she replaced the passbook exactly where she'd found it. Closed the drawer, left the study, left the house. 10 minutes start to finish. I fast-forwarded through evening footage. Preston came over around 7 for dinner. I watched his interaction with Savannah on the porch before they went inside together. She acted completely normal, smiled, kissed him, chatted about wedding details. Never mentioned the passbook. Never mentioned finding $350,000. Then I saw her face on the camera footage again, that smile spreading as she held my passbook in her hands. And I understood Savannah wasn't just stealing from me. She was stealing from Preston, too. She'd found the money, photographed it, and deliberately kept it secret from her fiancé because she wasn't planning to share. I sat there in my garage with the footage paused on her face, that calculating expression frozen on my phone screen. Preston was planning to steal my house. Savannah was planning to steal my savings, and neither of them knew about the other's scheme. I watched that footage 20 times, pausing on the moment her expression changed from searching to satisfied. I memorized that calculating smile, the way her fingers moved across the camera on her phone, photographing every page. Not out of anger, though I felt plenty, but because I needed to remember the exact face of the woman who just decided to take my life savings without telling the man she was about to marry. And I realized Preston had no idea he was engaged to someone even more ruthless than he was. I spent Thursday and Friday thinking about Savannah's calculating smile on that camera footage. Friday night at 11 o'clock, I couldn't sleep. I went to the garage and did something I'd been avoiding for 15 years. There's a cardboard box on the highest shelf of my garage that I haven't touched since Preston left for college. And that night, I finally climbed the ladder and brought down every memory I had of the son I used to know. The ladder creaked. I'm 69. Climbing ladders at midnight probably isn't smart. The box sat in the far corner, covered in thick dust, faded tape, brown cardboard. Written across the top, Preston, school years. I brought it down, carefully set it on my workbench. Stood there staring before I could open it. The flaps were brittle tape pulling away. The smell hit me, old paper things stored and forgotten. First item, a baseball trophy. Plastic gold paint peeling. Little League 1992. Most improved player. Preston would have been 9. I remembered that day. The ceremony in the park. Preston running to me, trophy held high, biggest smile I'd ever seen. Next, a Father's Day card. Construction paper folded crooked. Crayon drawing, stick figure man with wrench, stick figure boy holding his hand. Inside, in 7-year-old handwriting, "Dad is my hero." He wrote that. 9 years old. He believed it. More drawings. Pencil sketches of our family standing in front of this garage. Report cards, all A's and B's. Teacher comments, "Preston is helpful and kind." Preston volunteers to assist others. Soccer certificates. Photos of us together, him 8 years old with grease on his face, standing beside me while I worked. Him holding a socket wrench bigger than his hand, grinning. Each item pierced deeper. I sat down on the concrete floor box between my knees, surrounded by artifacts of a child who no longer exists. A child's handwriting is a time capsule. You can see their whole heart in the way they press the crayon into paper. "Dad is my hero." Each letter carefully formed, some backwards, all honest. That boy meant every word. Where did that boy go? I don't know how long I sat there. 20 minutes. 2 hours. At some point, I realized I was crying. Saturday morning, 9 o'clock. I was back in the garage making coffee, box still on the workbench, contents spread out. Preston's car pulled up. Alone. No Savannah for the first time in weeks. He got out, walked to the garage with his head down. Looked exhausted. Shadows under his eyes. Unshaven. Entered without greeting. Sat on the workbench edge near the box. Noticed it, but didn't comment. I poured 2 cups of coffee, handed him one. He accepted silently. We stood in uncomfortable quiet. "You're here early," he finally said. "Couldn't sleep, you..." "Yeah." Silence. "Where's Savannah?" I asked. "What, was going to ask you the same thing. Thought maybe she'd stopped by." "Haven't seen her." He nodded. Stared at the floor. "Can I ask you something, Dad?" "Go ahead." He set his coffee down, rubbed his face. Has Savannah said anything to you about the garage?" My heart went still. "What do you mean?" "And I overheard her on the phone yesterday, talking to someone about future assets or something. Real estate talk. But she mentioned your name." Said all future assets must be under her name, including the garage. He looked up at me. Oh, she said, including the garage. Why would she be talking about your garage, Dad? You might wonder why I didn't tell him right then, that I knew everything, that Savannah had found my savings, that his fraud was worthless. But some people need to walk into the fire themselves. Some lessons can't be taught. They can only be lived. To me, maybe she was talking about a different property, I said carefully. Real estate agents talk about lots of buildings. No. He shook his head. She said your name. She said Leland's garage. I don't understand why she wouldn't tell me. I watched his face. This man who'd committed fraud against his dying mother days ago. This man who'd signed fraudulent papers with Savannah's help. Today he looked like a lost child, confused about why his fiancée was planning things without him. What have you asked her? I said. Not yet. So why not? He picked up his coffee, stared into it. I don't know. Maybe I don't want to hear the answer. We stood in silence. The box of his childhood sat between us on the workbench. Dad is my hero card visible on top. Weddings in 3 weeks, he said. It is. Lot of money already spent. Deposits, venue, catering, all non-refundable. That's how they get you. He looked at me. Would you, if you were me, would you still go through with it? If something felt wrong, I looked at my 32-year-old son, sitting on my workbench, holding cold coffee, admitting his fiancée was planning something he didn't understand. He knows. A part of him already knows Savannah is using him, that she's hiding things, that this wedding is a trap. But knowing and stopping are two different things. And Preston has never been good at stopping himself once he commits to a path, even when that path leads straight off a cliff. Only you can answer that, son, I said. He nodded slowly, finished his coffee, set the cup down. Thanks, Dad. He left without looking at the box again. Within the week, I'd watch him make a choice that would seal both their fates. Preston left Saturday morning still planning to marry Savannah, despite sensing something was wrong. I watched him drive away, and knew within days I'd witnessed the final proof that my son was beyond saving. Love is measured in the things you never tell anyone, the night shifts. Nobody knows you worked the truck, sold without explanation, the 3 months you stayed awake. So your wife could feel beautiful for 1 more year. Monday morning, I helped Lorraine adjust her wig before her treatment appointment. She stood at the bedroom mirror, hands trembling slightly as she positioned it just right. "Hi. Does it look natural today?" she asked. "I don't want people at the treatment center staring." "You look beautiful," I said. "You always do." She smiled, but I could see worry in her eyes. The wig was perfect, real human hair, hand-tied the exact shade of chestnut she'd worn her whole life. $1,200 for the most natural one I could find. She never asked how I afforded it. I told her I'd saved up. That was technically true. What I didn't tell her, that the morning I'd handed her that wig 6 months ago, I'd driven straight from a night shift to the wig shop downtown, still smelling like motor oil, and paid cash. The woman behind the counter had asked if I wanted it gift-wrapped. I said no. I wanted to give it to her myself with my own hands, so she'd know exactly where it came from. She never asked again after I said I'd saved up. She just trusted me. That's what made standing in that kitchen listening to Preston discuss her death like a scheduling problem so much worse. She trusted everyone in this family completely. She still does. Wednesday afternoon, I needed an electrical crimper Kieran had borrowed. Went to his room to find it. His toolbox sat on the desk drawer half open. A receipt fell out when I moved it. Vehicle sale document. Kieran's truck sold to private buyer for $8,500 cash. I sat on the edge of his bed holding that piece of paper. Insurance denied coverage. $7,000 out of pocket. The money appeared. Kieran said he'd found it in savings. His truck was his only major possession. Saved 2 years to buy it. Proud of that truck. Sold it to save his mother. Never told anyone. Been taking the bus to work sites every morning since. In the rain. In the cold. Never complained once. I sat there thinking about Preston conspiring to steal a house. About Savannah photographing savings accounts. About Kieran selling his truck without telling anyone. There are two kinds of love in this world. One measures what it gives. The other measures what it takes. One works 3 months of night shifts for a wig. The other steals a house from a dying woman. And somehow, impossibly, I raised one of each. Friday evening, Preston and Savannah came for dinner. Lorraine had made pot roast, despite her fatigue, wanting things to feel normal. Wanting to be a good mother for her son's fiancé. Dinner conversation about wedding flowers, venue, logistics, guest count. Savannah smiled warmly, complimented the meal. Preston asked about Lorraine's treatment, sounded genuinely concerned. If I didn't know better, I'd believe it all. After dinner, I went to the kitchen to refill the water pitcher. Living room was 10 feet away. I could hear their voices clearly in the quiet house. They thought I was out of earshot. "Oh, your mom looks worse," Savannah said quietly. "Yeah, the treatment's hard on her." "How long do the doctors say?" "They won't give a timeline. Could be months, could be longer." Silence. Then Preston's voice lower. "If Mom passes before the wedding, we won't even have to explain anything to anyone. The house transfer, the timing, it'll all just be grief." "Exactly," Savannah said. "Natural sympathy. Nobody questions a grieving son. Makes things simpler. It's much simpler." Water overflowed the pitcher and spilled across the counter. My hands had gone numb. Because there's a difference between plotting against someone and wishing they'd die. One is evil. The other is something I don't have a word for. I stood at that sink, water running cold over my hands, listening to my son discuss his mother's potential death like it was a scheduling solution. Not grief, not pain, not even cold calculation. Simple logistics. "How much longer do we wait before filing the deed?" Savannah asked. Not Malcolm said, "Give it 2 weeks for processing. After Thanksgiving. And if she's still alive at the wedding?" "Then she's alive. We adjust. But honestly, the way she looks, I don't think that's going to be a problem." Better for us if it's not." I set that water pitcher down on the counter so slowly, so carefully moving, like a man defusing a bomb. Because at that moment, I understood something absolute. My son was no longer someone I could save. No longer someone I should try to save. That comment about his mother dying wasn't a mistake. Wasn't said in anger or desperation. It was said casually, logically, like a businessman discussing scheduling conflicts. That is who Preston truly is. I'd been collecting evidence for weeks, recording conversations, documenting fraud, protecting assets, but I'd still been hoping, stupidly, impossibly hoping, that somewhere inside the man who wished for his mother's death, there was still a trace of the boy who wrote, "Dad is my hero," in crayon. There wasn't. That boy was gone. Maybe he'd never really existed. Maybe I just wanted to believe he did. I walked back into the living room, carrying the water pitcher. Preston and Savannah were looking at wedding magazines, laughing about something. "More water, anyone?" I asked. They smiled, said no thank you. Lorraine came back from the bathroom, sat between them on the couch. Put her arm around Preston. "I'm so glad you're here," she said to him. Me too, Mom," he said, kissing her cheek. I watched him hold her, smile at her, act loving and concerned, and I knew exactly what I had to do. After hearing Preston wish for his mother's death, Friday night, I barely slept. Saturday morning at 6 a.m., I sat alone in my garage workshop holding a blue passbook, thinking about 22 years of sacrifice that my son would never know about and didn't deserve. The passbook felt heavier than it should. Just paper and ink. But it represented every overtime shift I'd ever worked, every vacation Lorraine and I had skipped, every year I'd driven the same beat-up truck instead of upgrading. $350,000, deposit by deposit over 22 years, starting in 2001, when Preston was 10 years old. I'd kept it secret, even from Lorraine. She thought we had maybe $80,000 in retirement savings from my pension contributions. Didn't know about this account. Every $200 overtime check. Every $800 bonus. Tax refunds. The $50,000 inheritance from my father in 1998, I told Lorraine I'd invested it in new garage equipment. Actually put it here for Preston's future. I traced my finger down the deposit dates, remembering each one. October 2006 told Lorraine we couldn't afford an anniversary cruise. She smiled and said she'd rather save the money anyway. March 2012 drove that old truck another 3 years when it should have been replaced. Every sacrifice building toward one moment, handing this passbook to Preston on his wedding day. Watching his face when he saw the number, telling him it was for a down payment on a house for security for starting his life right. Malcolm had confirmed it 2 weeks ago. Savannah found this passbook in October, during that dinner when she asked to use the bathroom. 3 days later, she started pushing for expensive wedding upgrades. Bigger venue, premium catering, open bar for 300 guests. She'd been planning how to spend it before Preston even knew it existed. I locked the real passbook in the garage safe and changed the combination. Then I went to the library on 5th Street and made 2 photocopies of every page, account number, balance, deposit history, all of it. 1 copy I gave to Malcolm. 1 copy I placed back in the desk drawer at the same 45-degree angle. Savannah had found it close enough to the original that anyone looking would see exactly what they expected to see. Let her photograph a copy. Let her plan around numbers that were already protected. The real passbook wasn't going anywhere. Heard Lorraine stirring upstairs Saturday morning, our usual routine. I went inside, made her tea with honey the way she liked it. Brought it to her bedside, kissed her forehead. "You're up early," she said, voice soft with sleep. "Ma, couldn't sleep. Wanted to make sure you had your tea." She smiled, took the cup in both hands, warming her fingers. She didn't know about the passbook. Didn't know I'd been documenting everything Preston and Savannah had done. Didn't know I was planning something for their wedding day. I'd keep it that way until I needed to tell her. "We have that dress fitting today," she said. 2 o'clock. Savannah wants me there. "I'll drive you." "You don't have to sit through all that. It's girl stuff. I want to be there." She squeezed my hand. "Thank you." 2 o'clock. Downtown Dayton Bridal Boutique. Elegant place, floor-to-ceiling mirrors, white furniture, champagne for the mothers. I pushed Lorraine's wheelchair through the door. Savannah was already there, looking perfect in designer jeans and heels. Preston stood beside her in a suit, taking afternoon off work for this. "Mrs. Hughes." Savannah's voice went honey-sweet. "You look lovely. I'm so glad you could make it." She took control of the wheelchair immediately. Wheeled Lorraine toward the back of the store. "You can wait here, Mr. Hughes," the consultant said, gesturing to chairs by the window. Young woman, mid-30s, professional smile. I sat. Watched. Savannah wheeled Lorraine to a corner behind the dress racks. Out of the consultant's sightline. Out of everyone's view except mine from this angle. Set the wheelchair brake. Left Lorraine there. Walked back to the center of the store where the consultant waited with wedding gowns. Lorraine sat alone in that corner for 5 minutes before anyone even looked at her. When the consultant brought out the first dress, Savannah stripped down to her underwear right there, no shame, confident and beautiful. Stepped into the gown. The consultant zipped her up. Savannah turned to the 3-way mirror. From her corner, Lorraine spoke. "That neckline is so elegant on you, sweetheart." Savannah glanced over her shoulder. "Uh-huh." Turned back to the mirror. Didn't even look at her. For 40 minutes, I watched my wife sit in that corner in her wheelchair, trying to be part of her son's wedding planning. Savannah tried on 6 dresses, discussed fabric alterations, veil options. Preston stood beside her the entire time, nodding and smiling. He glanced at his mother once. Just once. Then Savannah touched his arm, and he looked away. The consultant finally turned toward Lorraine. "Does mother of the groom have an opinion on this one?" Savannah cut in immediately. "She's tired today. We'll decide ourselves." Lorraine's hand went to her wig, straightening it with trembling fingers. Tried to smile. I gripped the arms of my chair so hard my knuckles went white. Final dress chosen. Savannah changed back into her street clothes. Walked to Lorraine's corner, all smiles. Thanks for coming," she said loudly enough for the consultant to hear. "It means so much to have family support. Performance of daughterly affection." The consultant smiled, pleased. In the parking lot, while I loaded the wheelchair into my truck bed, I heard Savannah's voice 10 feet away. That took forever. She said to Preston, quiet, but not quiet enough. "Can we get dinner without them?" "Yeah," Preston said. "I'll text Dad we have plans." They knew I could hear. They didn't care. 20-minute drive home in silence. Lorraine stared out the passenger window. I didn't turn on the radio, didn't try to fill the quiet. We were 2 miles from home when she finally spoke. "I always thought any daughter-in-law would want to please her mother-in-law," she said quietly. Pause. "I didn't have that relationship with your mother either, but I tried. Every Sunday dinner for 12 years I tried." I didn't answer, because there was nothing to say. Lorraine had just acknowledged what she'd been denying for months. She saw it now. She knew. Savannah didn't love our family, didn't even respect us. And Preston was letting it happen. That broke something different than the money or the fraud or even the death wish. It broke the last piece of her hope that our son had chosen someone who could love the people who raised him. And watching that hope die in my wife's eyes hurt more than anything Preston had done to me. That Saturday boutique trip broke something in Lorraine I couldn't fix. She spent Sunday in bed, Monday barely speaking. Tuesday evening, I was in the kitchen making dinner when Kieran slammed his work bag on the table and said, "I know what Preston and Savannah are doing with the house papers." I set down the knife I'd been using to cut vegetables, looked at my youngest son. "What are you talking about?" His face was red, jaw tight, hands balled into fists. "I saw the deed copy in his briefcase 2 days ago. I needed jumper cables, went to his trunk. His briefcase was open. Property transfer deed right there on top." "Kieran, they're trying to steal the house. From you. From Mom." His voice cracked. "While she's dying, they're stealing her house." I pulled out a chair, sat down slowly. "I know," I said. "I've known for 6 weeks." He stared at me. "You what?" "I know about the deed. I know about the fraud. I know everything." "And you haven't stopped them. You haven't called the police. But the house is protected. I put it in a living trust back in October. Preston's deed is worthless. It can't transfer property that isn't ours to transfer anymore." Kieran sank into the chair across from me. "Dad, he's committing fraud. Against his own parents. Against his dying mother." "I know. So what are you doing about it?" I looked at my youngest son. The one who'd sold his truck. The one who'd turned down nearly 6 figures to stay home. The one who'd never asked for anything. "I need you to do nothing," I said. "I have my own plan. Trust me. Nothing you want me to do, nothing while Preston. I want you to trust me. Can you do that?" He stared at me for a long time. Finally nodded. "But if he hurts Mom, he won't. I won't let him. I promise you that." Kieran left. I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the chair where Preston had sat for Sunday dinners for 30 years. The chair where he'd eaten meals his mother cooked, where he'd laughed and told stories and acted like family. That chair felt empty in a way that had nothing to do with him not being there. Before I tell you what that rejection letter said, are you still with me? Comment A if you think I should confront Preston immediately, or B if I should wait for the wedding. Add one short reason so I can see how you're reading this. Quick note, what follows includes some recreated details for storytelling purposes, but the core lesson is what matters. Wednesday morning, 7 a.m., I sat in Malcolm's office drinking coffee that tasted like motor oil. After Preston tried to file the deed, Malcolm said, without preamble. November 15th, submitted it to Montgomery County Recorder's Office. My hands went still on the coffee cup. And rejected. Property's already in the Leland Hughes Living Trust. Can't transfer what you don't own. Malcolm slid a document across his desk. Official county letterhead. Stamped in red ink void. Property in trust. En d'actin. The clerk called Preston's office to inquire about the discrepancy. Asked if there was an error, if maybe he'd submitted the wrong property address. What did Preston say? He hung up. Hasn't returned their calls since. I stared at that document, at the red stamp, at my son's failed crime preserved in official records. This is attempted deed fraud, Malcolm said. Ohio Revised Code 2913.43. It's prosecutable. With your security camera footage of the signing the audio recordings, Savannah's confession about the medical paperwork, lie we have everything. We can file charges today. What would happen? In criminal prosecution, both of them. Preston could face 2 to 8 years. Savannah the same. Elder abuse enhancement might add more time. It's a federal case at this point. I looked at Malcolm, my friend of 20 years, the man who'd helped me protect everything I'd built. Or, I said, or you let it go. The house is safe. Your savings are safe. Preston's fraud failed. You could walk away, cut them out of your life, move on. I thought about Lorraine sitting in that corner at the bridal boutique, about the 20-minute silent car ride home, about her quiet voice saying she'd tried to please my mother for 12 years, about Kieran's truck, about the wig I'd worked 3 months of night shifts to buy, about Preston wishing his mother would die so the timing would be convenient. What exactly do you want to do, Leland? Malcolm asked. I looked at that rejected deed. Thought about everything I knew, everything I documented, everything Preston and Savannah had done thinking no one was watching. Thought about Kieran's sold truck, about Lorraine's hope dying in that car, about 22 years of saving money my son would never know about. I want him to see himself in front of everyone, I said. Malcolm leaned back in his chair. What does that mean? And I want all 300 of them to see exactly who my son chose to become. Malcolm studied me. You're not talking about criminal prosecution. I'm talking about something worse. I'm talking about the kind of justice that doesn't come from a courtroom. The kind that comes from standing in front of everyone you know and having them see the truth. That's a risk. The risk is already handled. The house can't be stolen. The fraud already failed. Now I just need Preston to understand what he did. And the only way he'll understand is if he sees it reflected in the eyes of 300 people who thought he was a good man. Malcolm tapped his pen on the desk. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The wedding remained 6 weeks away, my deadline for public reckoning. The evidence covered 3 square feet of workbench under the fluorescent lights. Saturday evening, 2 weeks before the wedding, and I'd finally laid out everything I'd collected since October. 8 pieces total. 2 manila folders on the left held printed transcripts of the audio recordings. First folder, Savannah's voice at the bridal boutique parking lot discussing all future assets, including the garage, with someone on speakerphone. Second folder, Preston's kitchen conversation with Savannah about timing mother's death before the wedding for natural sympathy. Center of the bench, 2 USB drives with security camera footage. Drive 2 captured Savannah in my bedroom on October 19th at 2:07 in the afternoon, photographing my savings passbook before replacing it in the dresser drawer. On the right, the rejected deed itself, county recorder's red void stamp across the top, dated November 16th. Behind it, Kieran's truck sale receipt for $8,500, dated July 23rd. Behind that, Malcolm's 6-page legal analysis documenting 12 counts of attempted fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. Final item: my handwritten timeline on graph paper tracking every suspicious conversation, every document, every lie from September through November. I heard Malcolm's sedan in the driveway at 7:15. Jesus, Leland. He stood in the garage doorway, still wearing his Saturday golf shirt, staring at the workbench. This is more than I expected. I wanted you to see it all together before I make any decisions. He moved to the bench, slowly picked up the first audio transcript, read it twice, set it down, picked up the second. His jaw tightened at Preston's death wish comment. These recordings are legal in Ohio. You'd a one-party consent state. I was present for both conversations. He examined the security footage timestamps, then the rejected deed, then Kieran's receipt. Spent 10 minutes reading his own legal analysis like he'd never seen it before. The truck receipt, he said finally. Why's this relevant? I show's character. Kieran sold his truck 4 months ago to pay for Mother's medication. Never told anyone. Preston was planning our funerals while his brother was sacrificing transportation. Malcolm set the receipt down carefully like it might break. What separates evidence from story evidence proves what happened. Story explains why it matters. I had both spread across 3 feet of workbench, and neither one could tell me what to do with them. This is airtight, Malcolm said. Prosecutable 6 ways from Sunday. Elder fraud conspiracy, attempted theft by deception, forgery, if we push the signature issue. Conservative estimate, Preston's looking at 18 months minimum, Savannah maybe 2 years. Not interested in prison. Then what are you interested in? I pulled the folded letter from my shirt pocket. 4 pages now, written over 6 weeks in the garage after Mother went to bed. Malcolm unfolded it, started reading. It began, Preston, you were 9 years old when you asked me what heroes do. I said heroes protect people who can't protect themselves. You said that's what dads are. I've thought about that conversation every day since I learned what you're planning. The letter detailed everything. The overheard plot at his house in October. The fraudulent deed signing. Savannah's comments about Mother's illness ruining the wedding atmosphere. His own words about timing her death for sympathy. The rejected deed. The passbook theft. The calculations. It ended. I sold my father's Impala and mortgaged this garage in 1995 to pay for your brain surgery. $18,000 I didn't have borrowed against everything I owned because that's what fathers do. You're planning to steal my home while your mother fights cancer. I need you to explain the difference between the father you had and the son you became. Malcolm read all 4 pages standing under the fluorescent lights. When he finished, he refolded the letter along my crease marks and handed it back without speaking for 30 seconds. You planning to give him this? Don't know yet. It's not evidence. Can't use it in court. It's not for court. Then what's it for? I looked at the workbench at 8 pieces of documentation that proved my son was a criminal, then at 4 pages that asked him to remember when he wasn't. It's for me, I said, so I know I tried. Malcolm nodded slowly. The wedding's in 2 weeks. You're still planning to let it happen. Unless you think I shouldn't. I think, he said carefully, that you've built something here that gives you options. Criminal prosecution, civil lawsuit, family intervention, public exposure. Question is, which option serves what you actually want? I want him to see himself. Then you need an audience, Malcolm said. And he's giving you 300 people in 2 weeks. After Malcolm left, I sat at the workbench, reorganizing everything into a single locked document box. The audio transcripts went in first, then the USB drives, then the rejected deed, then the timeline. Locked it, put the key on my personal key ring next to the garage keys and the house keys and the truck keys. The letter stayed separate, unfolded on the workbench under the lights. Thought about knocking on Preston's door tonight, handing him this letter, watching his face read what he's done to people who loved him. Thought about it a long time, standing in the garage doorway with truck keys in my hand. Then I turned off the light, locked the drawer, and went to bed. Task 4.4. Thursday morning, I left the passbook in the desk drawer, not locked. Not hidden, just visible enough for someone looking. 10 days before the wedding. Preston had called Tuesday asking to stop by Thursday afternoon to finalize reception details. Seating charts, he said. Timeline for toasts. The kind of planning that sounded legitimate until you remembered he was trying to steal my house. I positioned the passbook at a 45-degree angle in the half-open desk drawer, the account number and balance visible if you glanced down from the office doorway. Then I checked the security camera angle twice. Perfect view of the desk, the drawer, anyone who walked past. They arrived at 3:30. Preston carried a binder labeled Wedding Timeline. Savannah wore the smile she saved for family visits, the one that never reached her eyes. "We need to nail down the toast order," Preston said, spreading papers across the kitchen table. "You're doing the father's toast after dinner, right?" "Planned on it. We'll keep it under 3 minutes. Venue has a strict schedule." Savannah's phone rang during the seating chart discussion. "Need better reception," she said, standing. "Can I use your office phone?" "Help yourself." I watched her walk down the hall, disappear into the office. Preston kept talking about table assignments, but I was counting seconds. 35 seconds later, Savannah returned phone call, apparently forgotten face, carefully neutral. They left at 4:15 with their finalized timeline. I waited until 4:30, then pulled up the security footage on my phone. 3:52 p.m. Savannah enters office, moves toward desk phone. 3:53, she stops mid-reach, staring down at something. Leans closer. Her hand moves toward the drawer, stops, pulls back. She takes her phone from her pocket, appears to photograph something, then straightens and walks out. She never made a phone call. I saved the clip, sent a copy to Malcolm, then kept scrolling through the day's footage. 7:18 p.m. Preston and Savannah, in my living room, sitting on the couch I'd owned since before Preston was born. The camera had audio. Savannah spoke first voice, lower than usual. "After we're married, we'll need cash for the Denver move. Your dad has savings we could... How long have you known about that account?" Silence for 3 seconds. "Does it matter? We're about to be family." "What's his is?" "You've known for weeks. You didn't tell me." "Preston." "What, how many weeks?" Savannah chuckled. Another silence, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, harder somehow. "Since October. I saw the passbook when I was helping your mom look for her medication list." "October. We got engaged in September." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you've been planning something for 2 months and didn't mention it once." The footage showed Preston standing, walking to the window, standing with his back to her for 20 seconds before leaving the frame. Savannah sat alone on the couch, staring at her hands, watching that camera footage of Preston's face when he realized she'd been lying to him for 1 second. I saw my son again, the one who used to trust people. I saved that clip too. Added it to the locked document box in the garage with the 8 other pieces of evidence. 9 pieces now. Enough to prove conspiracy, enough to prove betrayal, enough to prove my son had chosen someone who lied to him as easily as she lied to me. Mother shifted beside me, turned onto her side. Her hand found mine in the darkness. "You look different this week," she said quietly. Like you're carrying something heavy. I squeezed her hand, felt how thin her fingers had become since September. The cancer taking pieces of her so gradually, I didn't notice day to day, only in moments like this, when I remembered what her grip used to feel like. I'm all right. You're a terrible liar, Leland. Always have been. I turned my head on the pillow, could just make out her face in the darkness. The wig sat on the dresser, where she'd carefully placed it before bed, same routine every night for 3 months. Without it, she looked more like herself somehow, more like the woman I'd married 41 years ago. Tomorrow I'll have to say some difficult things, I said. But you don't need to worry. I'm right here. Her hand tightened on mine. Is it about Preston? I nodded, forgetting she couldn't see me clearly in the dark, then said yes. She didn't ask what kind of difficult things. Didn't ask why or how or what I'd discovered. Just lay there holding my hand like she'd held it through 41 years of difficult things, trusting that I wouldn't do anything unless I had no other choice. Her hand in mine felt lighter than it did 6 months ago, the cancer taking weight even from her grip, but she squeezed with everything she had left. I've known something was wrong, she whispered. The way he looks at the house now, the questions about paperwork. I kept telling myself I was imagining it. You weren't imagining it, but you fixed it, whatever it was. I protected us. House is safe, you're safe. But tomorrow, people need to know what almost happened. She was quiet for a long time. Outside the bedroom window, I could hear December wind moving through the bare trees, the same trees I'd planted when we bought this house in 1978. 45 years of roots growing deep while my family's roots rotted from the inside. You're best man I've ever known, she said finally. I lay there, eyes closed in the dark, thinking tomorrow I'll do the only thing left I can do for this family. Tomorrow at the wedding, everyone will see what I've seen. Not revenge, not punishment. Just truth spoken out loud by a father who sold everything once to save his son's life and won't let that son destroy himself completely. Mother fell asleep holding my hand. I stayed awake until 3 a.m. watching the ceiling, counting hours until the wedding. Dawn light came through the bedroom window, and I watched Lorraine sleeping first peaceful sleep she'd had in 3 nights. Saturday morning, December 16th. The wedding day. I'd been counting down to for 8 weeks, not with joy, but with the grim certainty of someone walking towards something necessary and terrible. I'd finally fallen asleep around 3:30 a.m., woke at 6, when the winter sun started turning the bedroom gray. Lorraine lay on her side facing me, breathing steady and quiet, one hand tucked under the pillow where her hair used to be before the chemotherapy. The alarm was set for 6:30, but I didn't wait for it. Slipped out of bed, showered, dressed in the suit I'd bought specifically for this day, charcoal gray pressed the night before, hanging on the closet door like a uniform. When I came back into the bedroom at 6:45, Lorraine was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the dress hanging beside my suit. Pale blue knee-length, the one she'd chosen 3 months ago, when Preston first told us about the wedding. I'll help you, I said. She nodded without speaking. 7 a.m. in the bathroom. I helped her into the shower chair, waited outside the door, helped her out 15 minutes later. Steadied her while she dried off, while she put on the slip and the pantyhose, while she sat at the vanity mirror, staring at her reflection with an expression I couldn't read. The wig sat on its stand beside the mirror. She reached for it, then stopped, hands hovering, not shaking exactly, just uncertain in the way she'd been uncertain every morning since May. Let me, I said. She nodded and looked down at her lap while I worked. I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say about it that we hadn't already said in 4 months of mornings exactly like this one. I just did it carefully, the way you do something that matters. When I stepped back, she looked at herself for a long moment, then at me in the mirror. She stared at herself for 10 seconds. Do I look too sick? Her voice came out smaller than usual. I don't want to embarrass Preston on his day. Something twisted in my chest. After everything, after the fraudulent deed, after the overheard conversations about timing her death, for sympathy, after Savannah's cruelty at the bridal boutique, she was still worried about embarrassing him. You could never embarrass anyone, I said. She touched the wig, gently adjusting the hair around her face. I mean the wig. What if it looks obvious? What if people stare? People will stare because you're beautiful. Leland, look at me. She turned on the vanity stool, met my eyes. You look most beautiful when you smile, I said. She studied my face for a moment, then smiled, tentative at first, then genuine, the smile that had made me propose 43 years ago in a garage much smaller than the one I owned now. Then I'll smile all day, she said. For him. I helped her into the dress at 7:30. Held it while she stepped carefully into it, zipped the back, fastened the tiny hook at the top. Her hands shook, adjusting the wig one more time, not from nerves about the wedding, but from the medication. And I steadied them with mine the way I'd done 10,000 times in 43 years of marriage. We should leave by 9:30, I said. Ceremony starts at 11. She nodded, sat on the bed to rest, and I went downstairs to call Kieran. He arrived at 9:15, driving his girlfriend's car since he'd sold the truck. Helped me get the wheelchair from the garage, helped me guide Lorraine down the front steps and into the back seat. Didn't ask questions. Hadn't asked questions since the night 2 weeks ago when I told him to come to the wedding no matter what he heard or saw. We arrived at Riverside Event Hall at 10 a.m. The parking lot was already half full. Preston's insurance colleagues, Savannah's real estate contacts, relatives I recognized from both sides of both families. 300 people total, according to the final head count Preston had mentioned Thursday, all dressed in formal attire, all walking toward the main entrance, carrying wrapped gifts and checking their phones. I parked near the accessibility entrance, unfolded. The wheelchair helped Lorraine into it. Kieran walked beside me as I guided her through the side door into the venue. The main hall opened up before us, high ceilings, chandeliers, white chairs arranged in rows, facing a flower-covered altar at the far end. 300 guests filled the space with conversation and rustling programs, and the particular sound of people gathering for something they expect to be joyful. Preston stood near the altar, talking to the officiant, wearing a black tuxedo I'd never seen before. He looked up as we entered, saw us across the room, and nodded once from a distance without approaching. Lorraine's hand tightened on the wheelchair armrest. He's probably just busy with guests. Savannah stood 30 feet away near the gift table, wearing her wedding dress, surrounded by bridesmaids adjusting her train. She glanced toward the entrance, saw us, and turned back to her conversation without acknowledgement. Kieran leaned down, voice quiet, near my ear. You sure about this, Dad? I'm sure. He straightened, put his hand on my shoulder for 2 seconds, then walked ahead to find his seat in the third row. I guided Lorraine's wheelchair down the side aisle toward the front row. People turned to look as we passed. Some smiled at Lorraine, some looked away quickly. When they noticed the wheelchair and the obvious wig, some whispered to their companions. The venue felt less like a wedding hall and more like a courtroom, where I was about to present evidence to a jury of 300 people who thought they'd come for champagne and cake. I settled Lorraine into the front row seat, reserved for family, locked her wheelchair beside the chair, and stood with my hand resting on her shoulder. She reached up, patted my hand twice. It's a beautiful ceremony space, she said. Preston chose well. I looked around the room. 300 guests in formal attire, checking programs and adjusting ties and smoothing dresses and taking photos of the flower arrangements. Preston at the altar, reviewing notes with the officiant. Savannah near the entrance, preparing for her processional. Kieran in the third row, watching me with an expression I couldn't read from this distance. They came to witness a wedding. They don't know they're about to witness something else. The processional music started, and 300 people stood. I stayed seated beside Lorraine, hand still on her shoulder. 11 a.m. exactly. Bridesmaids appeared at the back entrance in matching burgundy dresses, walking slowly down the center aisle toward the flower-covered altar. Preston stood at the front, beside his best man, hands clasped, composed and confident in his black tuxedo. Then Savannah appeared in white. The guests made appreciative sounds. Long train, intricate beading veil covering her face. She walked alone down the aisle, smiling behind the veil. Reached the altar, took her position across from Preston. Reverend Martin Hayes stepped forward between them, a silver-haired minister in his 60s that Savannah's family had hired, wearing traditional robes and holding a ceremony book. His voice carried clearly through the hall. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the joining of Preston Michael Hughes and Savannah Marie Frost in holy matrimony. Lorraine's hand found mine where it rested on her shoulder. Squeezed once. Reverend Hayes continued through the traditional opening about love and commitment and sacred bonds. Preston and Savannah faced each other, hands joined, while 300 guests watched in silence. I watched too, but I was seeing different scenes. 4-year-old Preston in a hospital bed. At Dayton Children's, bandages covering his head tubes and monitors surrounding the bed, his small hand gripping my finger so hard his knuckles went white. Barely conscious voice, a thread, don't leave, Daddy. I didn't leave. Stayed in that chair for 48 hours while Preston slept and woke and slept again, never letting go of my finger. Preston. Reverend Hayes said at the altar, Do you take Savannah to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. 10-year-old Preston in the garage on a Saturday morning, sitting on a rolling stool while I showed him how to replace brake pads. His hands too small to grip the wrench properly, but trying anyway, asking questions about hydraulic systems, saying, When I grow up, I want to work here with you every day. Me saying, You can do anything you want. Him looking up with grease on his nose, smiling, but this is the best place. Reverend Hayes said, Do you take Preston to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. The ceremony moved into traditional vows. Love, honor, cherish. In sickness and in health. Preston and Savannah repeating phrases that sounded sincere if you didn't know what I knew about fraudulent deeds and timing your mother's death for convenience. If anyone objects to this union, Reverend Hayes said, reaching the moment every ceremony includes, and no one expects anyone to use, speak now or forever hold your peace. Silence filled the hall. 300 people holding their breath for the traditional 5 seconds. Lorraine leaned close, whispered, Our boy looks so handsome. I said nothing. Let the moment stretch. Let the silence complete itself. Let Preston marry a woman who'd hidden the discovered savings from him for 2 months. Let him bind himself legally to someone who'd deceived him as thoroughly as they'd both tried to deceive me. Reverend Hayes nodded, satisfied, and continued. When does a son stop being your son? Is it gradual like rust forming, or sudden like an engine seizing one moment working and the next gone forever? 18-year-old Preston in cap and gown at graduation, walking across the stage to receive his diploma, turning to find me and Lorraine and Kieran in the 3rd row, grinning so wide I could see it from 50 feet away. Coming home that night, hugging me in the kitchen. Thanks for everything, Dad. For all of it. Me saying, you earned this yourself. Him shaking his head, you taught me how. I searched through those memories, the hospital bed, the garage, the graduation, 1,000 other moments spanning 32 years, looking for the thread that connected that child to the man standing at the altar now. The man who'd forged documents to steal his dying mother's home. The man who'd calculated the benefits of timing her death. Couldn't find the connection, like searching for a bridge that had collapsed, leaving nothing but gap. Reverend Hayes was talking about rings now. The best man produced them from his pocket. Preston slid one onto Savannah's finger, repeated words about eternal commitment. Savannah slid one onto Preston's finger, repeated the same words. 300 people watched, smiling. Kieran sat in the third row with his jaw tight, watching me instead of the ceremony. Lorraine's hand found mine again during the final blessing, during the moment when Reverend Hayes told Preston he could kiss his bride. She squeezed with what little strength the cancer had left her, and I squeezed back, knowing she still believed this was a joyful day, still believed the handsome man at the altar was our boy, still couldn't see what I'd seen for 8 weeks. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Hayes said. Preston lifted Savannah's veil, kissed her while 300 people applauded. The pianist began the recessional music. Preston and Savannah turned to face the crowd, hands joined, smiling. Applause echoed through the hall, genuine, warm, celebratory. I sat beside Lorraine's wheelchair, hand on her shoulder, and felt something in my chest loosen. Not relief, not satisfaction. Something else. Letting go. The end of a chapter I'd tried to keep open for 32 years, tried to believe could still be saved, right up until the moment I watched a stranger wearing my son's face promise eternal love to a woman who'd taught him how to steal from his dying mother. As Preston and Savannah walked back up the aisle past 300 applauding guests, past Kieran's careful, neutral expression, past me and Lorraine in the front row, Preston's eyes moved across us without stopping, did not pause, did not nod, did not acknowledge, just walked past hand in hand with his new wife toward whatever reception hall waited beyond these doors. Lorraine turned in her wheelchair, watching them go. "Beautiful ceremony," she said quietly. "Just beautiful." I stood, gripped the wheelchair handles, and followed the crowd toward the reception. The photographer called for family photos, and Lorraine stood slowly from her wheelchair, steadying herself against the table. The reception hall had filled quickly after the ceremony. 300 guests moving between cocktail tables and the open bar conversations rising to fill the space with that particular sound of celebration. White linens covered round tables arranged in rows facing a small stage where a DJ was setting up equipment. Floral centerpieces, champagne glasses, waiters circulating with appetizers. Daniel Crawford, the wedding photographer Savannah had hired, a professional in his 40s, carrying 2 camera bodies and a confident smile, stood near the stage waving toward the family tables. "Bride and groom families, please, let's get formal portraits before dinner service." Preston and Savannah were already moving toward the stage from the head table. Kieran stood from our table, offered his hand to help Lorraine, but she waved him off gently. "Well, I can walk," she said, adjusting the wig with both hands the way she always did before standing. "It's not far." I moved to her side anyway, ready to steady her if needed. We walked together toward the stage, Lorraine moving carefully in her heels, me matching her pace, Kieran a step behind. The photographer was arranging Preston and Savannah in the center, gesturing for family members to flank them. Parents on either side, siblings behind, big smiles, everyone. Lorraine reached the stage, steps, gripped the railing, pulled herself up carefully. Stood beside Preston, smiled at him. He glanced at her, briefly, turned back to face the camera. Savannah stepped closer to Lorraine, still smiling for the photographer's benefit. Then she leaned in close enough that her lips nearly touched Lorraine's ear and whispered something I couldn't hear from 3 feet away. Lorraine's face changed. Smile disappeared. Started to step back. Savannah's hand moved fast, reached up, grabbed the wig, and ripped it off Lorraine's head in one swift, violent motion. Held it up for a second like a trophy, then dropped it on the stage floor. 3 seconds of absolute silence. Lorraine's hands flew to her bare head, covering the patchy gray stubble the chemotherapy had left. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then she started crying, not loud sobbing, but the quiet, desperate kind that's somehow worse. Preston stood 2 feet away, saw it happen, turned his face away and looked at the floor. Someone near the bar gasped, "Oh my God." 2 of Savannah's bridesmaids near the front tables put their hands over their mouths. One of them I didn't catch, which let out a sound that might have been a snicker. Savannah stood there in her white dress, smiling slightly, looking at Lorraine with an expression I'd seen before. The same expression from the bridal boutique. The same expression from the living room camera footage. Satisfied, I stood up from my table, didn't run, didn't shout, just walked toward the stage with the same deliberate pace I'd use crossing a garage floor to reach a tool I needed. 300 people watched me walk. The silence stretched absolute except for my footsteps and Lorraine's quiet crying. I climbed the 3 steps to the stage, reached Lorraine in 4 more steps. She stood with both hands covering her head shoulders, shaking eyes squeezed shut. Like if she couldn't see the crowd, then they couldn't see her. I took off my suit jacket, the charcoal gray one I'd pressed the night before, and draped it gently over her head and shoulders like a shawl. Adjusted it so it covered her completely from head to mid-back. "Look at me," I said quietly. She opened her eyes, looked down at me through tears. I knelt on the stage floor in my pressed slacks and white dress shirt so our eyes were level. Took both her hands in mine. "Stakati." In my eyes, I said clearly loud enough that the silence carried my voice to the back tables without needing amplification. "You are still the most beautiful woman in this room." Her face crumpled. Fresh tears, but different ones. Her fingers gripped my jacket where it covered her head. "Hi, Leland," she whispered. "Stand up with me," I said. "I need you standing." She nodded. I stood, kept her hands in mine, and we stood together on that stage under the lights, while 300 people watched in complete silence. 3 seconds doesn't sound like much time until you're counting it: 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, while your wife covers her bare head and cries in front of 300 people who came for cake. I turned to face the room, looked across the tables, the faces, the formal attire and champagne glasses and abandoned appetizer plates. Preston's insurance colleagues from the office, Savannah's real estate contacts, relatives from both families, friends, acquaintances, plus ones who'd never met either of us. 300 witnesses. I walked to the microphone stand at center stage where the DJ had set up for announcements. Pulled it from the stand, adjusted the height, tapped it once. The thump echoed through the sound system. My hand wrapped around that microphone, and for the first time in 6 months, I felt absolutely certain. Not angry, not nervous, just certain the way you're certain which wrench fits which bolt. Says, "I am Leland Hughes," I said into the microphone. My voice came through the speakers mounted in all 4 corners, reaching every table, every chair, every person in the hall. "I am father of the groom." Preston stood up from the head table. "Dad, don't." I kept speaking, not louder, but steady. "Before this party continues, there are things I need to say to everyone here." Savannah had gone pale, all the satisfaction drained from her face. She looked at Preston, then back at me, calculating whether to move, whether to speak, whether to run. Kieran sat at our family table with his arms crossed, watching me with an expression of quiet support. Lorraine stood behind me, still covered in my jacket, no longer crying, just listening. I looked out at 300 people in formal attire who'd driven to Dayton on a Saturday in December, expecting champagne toasts and wedding cake, and the kind of celebration people post photos of on social media. The room went entirely silent. No sound of glasses, clinking chairs, scraping whispers passing between tables. Only my voice through the sound system amplified to reach every corner where 300 people sat frozen waiting. And I began to tell it. I told them about the Chevrolet first, how 28 years ago I sold the car I'd rebuilt with my own hands to pay for Preston's surgery when insurance denied the claim. 1995. I said into the microphone, my voice steady and amplified across the silent hall. Preston was 4 years old, brain surgery at Children's Hospital in Columbus. The insurance company said the procedure was experimental, wouldn't cover it. The surgeon said without it, Preston would have permanent damage, maybe wouldn't make it to his 5th birthday. I could see Preston from the stage, standing frozen at the head table in his tuxedo. His face had gone white. 300 people listening. No one moved. No one spoke. Preston never knew about that truck. I told him I sold it because I wanted something newer. He was 4, he believed me. I let him believe me for 28 years. Preston's mouth opened slightly, closed. His hands gripped the edge of the table. That was the moment watching my son realize he owed his life to a sacrifice he never knew happened, could never acknowledge, could never repay that I understood why I'd come here. Not for justice, not for revenge, for truth that could never be undone once spoken. 3 months ago, I said, shifting forward in the timeline. I overheard Preston and his fiancée discussing how to forge documents to steal my house while my wife battles cancer. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone near the back said something I couldn't make out. What do you inquire? They filed fraudulent deed papers with the county recorder on November 15th. The county rejected them because I'd already placed the property in a living trust. The rejected documents are public record if anyone wants to verify. I paused. Let that sink in. Watched insurance colleagues and real estate contacts processing what I'd just said about the people they'd driven here to celebrate. My younger son, Kieran. I gestured toward our family table where Kieran sat watching calmly. Sold his truck 4 months ago for $8,500 to pay for his mother's experimental cancer medication. Never told anyone. Just did it because it needed doing. Kieran nodded once, expressionless. Preston, I said, looking directly at my older son, spent those same 4 months calculating how to steal from us. Preston started to speak, stopped. Sat down heavily in his chair. But I have recordings, I said. Audio and video. 6 months of documentation. Malcolm Mercer, my attorney, has reviewed everything and confirmed 12 counts of attempted fraud and elder abuse. I chose not to press charges. I chose this instead. I pulled my phone from my pocket, connected it to the hall's sound system through the DJ's equipment. Tapped the screen twice. Preston's voice filled the hall through 4 corner speakers, crystal clear. If Mom passes before the wedding, we won't even have to explain anything to anyone. Natural sympathy, people understand. Savannah's voice responding. And we'd have the house free and clear for the Denver move. When Preston's recorded voice saying, "Less trouble if Mom passes," echoed through the hall speakers, I watched 50 people in the back rows physically recoil. Some covered their mouths, some shook their heads, but all of them heard it. The recording ended. Silence again, heavier this time. I tapped my phone again. The projector screen behind the DJ station lit up with a security camera photo timestamp October 19th, 2:07 p.m. Savannah in my bedroom, phone in hand, photographing the savings passbook spread open on my dresser. That's my daughter-in-law. I said, photographing my financial records during a family dinner. She hid that information from Preston for 2 months, only telling him about the account after they were engaged, and he was already committed. Savannah stood up from the head table. Her eyes darted toward the exits, calculating. Preston sat motionless, staring at his hands. The hardest part, I said, and my voice caught slightly for the first time, wasn't discovering the fraud. It was recognizing I'd lost my son years ago and just hadn't admitted it yet. Lorraine made a small sound behind me. I didn't turn around. So here's what happens now, I said. I reached into my inner jacket pocket, the pocket where I'd carried it every day for 6 weeks, checking twice daily to make sure it was still there, and pulled out the savings passbook. Held it up high so all 300 people could see it. The blue cover, the account number visible, the 22 years of deposit records inside. This is 22 years of savings, I said. $350,000. Every overtime shift I worked, every repair job I did on weekends, every dollar I didn't spend on myself, so I could give my sons a better start than I had. Preston stood up again, tears streaming down his face openly now. This was going to be your wedding gift, I told him. Split between you and Kieran. Your down payment on a future. Your thank you for being the sons I thought you were. I looked at Preston across 20 feet of reception hall, across 28 years of fatherhood, across the unbridgeable gap between the child I'd saved and the man who'd tried to destroy me. The passbook felt lighter than I expected in my hands. 22 years of weight reduced to paper and ink, and tearing it felt like the easiest thing I'd done in 6 months. You didn't lose $350,000, I said clearly. You just lost your parents. I tore the passbook in half. The binding split cleanly, tore it again into quarters. The pages separated, numbers and dates and deposit amounts fragmenting. Let the pieces drift from my hands to the stage floor like snow. Preston stared at them through tears, mouth open, not making sound. Savannah struggled against Kieran's blocking position, trying to reach the stage, trying to reach the pieces, trying to salvage something. I stepped down from the stage, walked past 300 silent witnesses in formal attire, walked to where Lorraine sat with my jacket still draped over her shoulders, covering her bare head, held out my hand. Let's go home, sweetheart. We walked down the center aisle, Lorraine's hand in mine, her other hand gripping my jacket still draped over her head through 300 silent witnesses. No one spoke. No one moved to stop us. The crowd just parted slightly as we passed each row, making space for the wheelchair I'd left behind at our table because Lorraine said she could walk this distance if I steadied her. Kieran fell in 3 steps behind us. Didn't say anything, didn't need to. Just walked with us the way he'd been walking with us through 6 months of this quiet, present, loyal in ways Preston had forgotten how to be. Our footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor. Lorraine leaned into me slightly, using my arm for balance, her breathing steady despite the exertion. My jacket covered her from head to shoulders like a shawl hiding what Savannah had exposed. Behind us, I could hear Preston saying something, voice raised, desperate, but couldn't make out the words and didn't try to. We passed the middle rows. Insurance colleagues in suits, real estate contacts in cocktail dresses, all watching us walk by with expressions I didn't bother reading. Past the back rows where relatives sat, cousins I hadn't seen in years, Lorraine's sister from Toledo, my uncle's family from Cincinnati. 10 feet from the exit doors, then movement in the back corner. An elderly woman in a navy dress standing up from her seat. Helen Bradshaw, my father's sister, 83 years old, with sharp eyes that had watched this whole thing unfold. She started clapping. Slow, deliberate applause that cut through the silence like hammer on anvil. Lorraine's grip on my arm tightened. Are they clapping for us? Don't look back, I said quietly. Just keep walking with me. Another person stood, then another, then 5 more, then a whole table, then half the room. Applause built behind us. Not cheering, not celebration, just steady, deliberate clapping that said, we see what happened here. We see who the victims are. We see who deserves to walk out with dignity. Kieran's voice came from behind us, quiet and certain. I'm right here, Dad. We reached the double doors. I pushed them open with my free hand, guided Lorraine through into December sunlight and cold air and the parking lot where my truck sat waiting. The doors swung closed behind us, muffling the applause. Walking through those doors felt like stepping out of a dark garage into daylight after hours under a car, eyes adjusting, lungs filling with clean air, weight lifting off shoulders that had carried it too long. Lorraine stopped on the sidewalk, turned to look at me. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. Did that really just happen? It happened. The passbook was a photocopy, I said. Made it 3 weeks ago at the library. The real one's in Malcolm's office safe. Has been since November. She stared at me for 3 seconds, then started laughing, the kind of exhausted, relieved laughter that borders on crying. You planned that, the dramatic tearing. Figured it would make a point. Kieran came through the doors behind us, let them close. That was the most dad thing I've ever seen you do. We drove home in my truck. Me and Lorraine in front, Kieran in the back seat. Through Dayton streets, decorated with Christmas lights, we'd been too stressed to notice on the drive there. That was December 16th. What followed played out over the next 3 weeks, like dominoes falling. The story spread through Dayton faster than I expected. 300 witnesses meant 600 phone calls by evening, 1,000 conversations by Monday morning. By Wednesday, the local paper had picked it up. Not the fraud details, those were sealed during investigation, but enough about a wedding confrontation that people talked. Detective interviewed me. Kieran reviewed the recordings and security footage and rejected deed. Interviewed Preston and Savannah separately. They blamed each other. Preston claimed Savannah manipulated him. Savannah claimed Preston initiated everything. The detectives' report noted their stories contradicted on 7 major points. The real passbook, the one I hadn't torn, the one sitting in Malcolm's safe, funded the experimental treatment Lorraine's insurance had denied for 6 months. Cost $47,000 for the first round. Malcolm handled the transfer on December 20th. Lorraine started treatment December 27th. Preston and Savannah's wedding venues sued for unpaid balances. Riverside Event Hall, the caterer, the florist, the DJ. $53,000 in bills they'd planned to pay with money they thought they'd have from my house. Money they never got. They blamed each other for that too. Do bad people ever really understand why they lost everything? Or do they just keep pointing at each other until there's nothing left to divide? Preston countersued, claiming she'd concealed material information about her knowledge of my accounts. Malcolm showed me the paperwork. Said they'd be in court for months, possibly years, each trying to prove the other was more guilty so they could escape the consequences. He asked again if I wanted to press charges. Said the county prosecutor would take the case, that conviction was virtually guaranteed with the evidence. I said no again. Why not? Malcolm asked. You've got them dead to rights. Because I said, justice doesn't always need a courtroom. Sometimes it just needs witnesses. 300 witnesses who saw Preston turn away while his new wife humiliated his dying mother. 300 witnesses who heard his voice on recording wishing for her death. 300 witnesses who watched him cry over torn money while his father walked away. That stayed with people. That followed Preston and Savannah wherever they went in Dayton, whatever jobs they applied for, whatever social circles they tried to enter. No courtroom required. People think when bad guys get punished, good guys feel victorious, triumphant, vindicated, satisfied with justice served. I didn't feel any of that watching Preston and Savannah's marriage collapse in 3 weeks, or hearing about the criminal investigation, or seeing the wedding debt pile up on their shoulders. I just felt tired and light. The letter had lived in my desk drawer for 3 months. 4 pages meant for Preston that he would never read. It was a Tuesday in mid-January, the evening after I'd locked up the garage. 23 degrees outside. Ohio winter doing what Ohio winter always does, arriving cold and patient and absolute. I sat at the workbench under the fluorescent lights and opened the drawer. The folded pages were right where I'd left them in November. Edges worn soft from every time I'd pulled them out, to add another thought, another paragraph, another attempt to say something that had no right words. I read them through one last time. The first page began with a memory Preston at 9 years old asking me what heroes do. I told him heroes protect people who can't protect themselves. He said that's what dads are. I'd thought about that conversation every single day since I learned what he was planning against his own mother. The second page covered the Chevrolet scheme, the brain surgery, the $18,000 he'd tried to steal from a woman fighting cancer. The third page was about watching him grow up, teaching him to change brake pads, standing in the audience at his graduation, believing I'd raised a good man. The fourth page ended with the words I'd written the night before the wedding. Somewhere between the child who gripped my finger in that hospital bed and the man who wished your mother dead, my son disappeared. And I couldn't save you. I couldn't even find you. I read those words aloud to the empty garage. My voice came back to me off concrete walls and metal tools. Then I lit a candle and held the first page over the flame. The corner caught slowly. Preston's name burned. The paragraph about heroes burned. Page by page, I fed the letter to the fire, the Chevrolet story, the memories of his childhood, the final goodbye until nothing remained but ash in a metal tin. It felt like releasing pressure from an engine that had been running hot too long. "Goodbye, son," I said. I sat until the candle burned out, and the cold had settled into my hands. Then I went inside where Lorraine sat watching television with a blanket across her lap, her hair still thin from chemotherapy, but growing back silver and soft, catching the lamplight. She looked up. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm okay." 2 weeks later, I called Kieran into the garage. He'd been living in the apartment above it since Christmas, helping with repairs during the day, studying engineering certification at night. Never once mentioned the Denver job again. I handed him an envelope. Inside were 2 sets of keys and a legal document Malcolm had prepared. "I'm transferring the property," I said. "House and garage. Into your name." He stared at me. "I don't need this, Dad. I never wanted it." "I know," I said. "That's exactly why." Preston had tried to take everything through force and deception. Kieran had given up his truck to save his mother's life, had given up a career opportunity to stay when we needed him. Never asked for recognition. Never expected reward. "Well, this isn't payment," I told him. "It's a father giving something to the son who stayed because he wanted to, not because he expected anything in return." He took the keys, felt their weight, then pulled me into the kind of hug men in our family give, quick, tight, and wordless. "Want you earned it," I said, by never trying to. Lorraine appeared in the doorway, smiling. "The keys fit your hand," she said softly. Later, she stood beside me as we watched Kieran's truck disappear down the street. "You did right," she said. "I know." Her fingers found mine. "Preston might come back someday." "Maybe," I said. "But the door he walks through won't lead to this house anymore. The person who deserves to keep a family is never the one who demanded it." And to you listening to my story, remember, this family justice isn't about getting even. It's about protecting the people who deserve your loyalty. Looking back, my biggest mistake wasn't confronting Preston too late. It was waiting so long to accept that the son I raised had become someone I didn't recognize. I kept searching for the child I remembered when I should have been protecting the woman who'd stood beside me for 43 years. Don't make my mistake. Don't let hope blind you to truth. Stories like mine, Dad's revenge stories, if you want to call them, that aren't really about revenge. They're about boundaries, about understanding that family justice means holding people accountable, even when it hurts. I believe God put me through this to teach me that loving someone doesn't mean accepting their cruelty. Real love sometimes looks like walking away. The standing ovation at that wedding wasn't for me. It was 300 people saying, "We see you, and protecting yourself doesn't make you the villain." If my story resonated with you, leave a comment below and tell me what you would have done in my situation. Would you have handled the family justice differently? Share this with someone who needs to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. And if you want more Dad's revenge stories that matter, please subscribe to Wise Revenge. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying until the very end. As a reminder, certain details have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes, but the lesson remains true. Protect those who deserve your protection, and don't be afraid to walk away from those who don't.